my father's will reading, the lawyer gave my brother the house, the truck, and the checking account. My aunt actually clapped. My brother's wife squeezed his arm and whispered, "Told you." And then the lawyer, a small gray man named Mr. Alderman, took a sip of water, looked around the room, and said 7 words that changed everything. Now, if everyone is ready, page 2. My name is Claire. I am 27 years old, and to explain page 2, I have to take you back a few years, to the family I grew up in. There were 4 of us once: Dad, Mom, my big brother Brandon, and me. Mom died when I was 15. Car accident. What road? Gone before the ambulance arrived. After that, it was Dad and me in the kitchen, and Brandon out being golden, because Brandon was the golden child. I want to be fair. He was handsome, loud, good at sports, good at rooms full of people. Brandon got a business degree and a job selling commercial insurance, and a wife named Vanessa, who introduced herself by what neighborhood she lived in. I became a nursing aide. Night shifts, old folks, bedpans and blood pressure cuffs. At every holiday, my Aunt Karen would look at me over the casserole and say, "Still doing the nurse thing, sweetie?" And then turn to Brandon and glow. Dad never glowed at anyone. Dad was a machinist, 38 years running his own small machine shop, Delaney Precision, 2 bays and a coffee pot. He was a quiet man. He noticed everything and said almost nothing. People mistook that for simple. People mistook me for simple, too. It runs in the family, apparently, the quiet and the noticing. 3 years ago, Dad called me on a Tuesday night and said 5 words that ended the life I had planned. "Claire Bear, the doctors found something." Heart failure. The slow kind. The kind that takes a strong man apart one staircase at a time. Brandon heard the news and said, "Well, Dad's tough." I heard the news, gave notice on my apartment, and moved home by the end of the month. That is not me being a hero. That is just what you do when you are the one who notices. Let me tell you what 2.5 years of caregiving actually looks like. It looks like working night shifts at the care home, coming home at 7 in the morning and making Dad's breakfast before I slept. It looks like a whiteboard of medications in the kitchen, 12 pills, 4 times a day. It looks like learning to shave another man's face because his hands shook too much and he was too proud to grow a beard. It looks like dropping out of the nursing degree I had finally started, because clinicals and caregiving do not fit in the same 24 hours. And you want to know what it looked like from Brandon's side? 4 visits in 2.5 years. I counted. I had time to count at 3 in the morning in the chair outside Dad's room. Visit 1, Thanksgiving, 1 hour, left before pie. Visit 2, Dad's birthday, brought a card. Vanessa waited in the car. Visit 3, I will get to visit 3. Visit 4, the last week, when the nurses said it was time. He stood in the doorway of Dad's room like it was contagious. Visit 3 was the one that mattered. It was a Sunday, about 1.5 years ago. Brandon showed up with coffee and his salesman smile and sat with Dad for 2 whole hours. I was so happy I nearly cried. Then I brought in the laundry and heard it through the door. "Dad, it is a bridge loan, that is all. The market is soft, our mortgage reset. I just need $35,000 to get through the quarter. You will get it back with interest." And my father, who never said no to his golden boy, said, "All right, son, all right." The check cleared that week. The visits stopped that week, too. That Christmas at Aunt Karen's, Vanessa cornered me by the dessert table. She twisted her glass and said, "So, Claire, your mom's engagement ring? Brandon says it's just sitting in a box somewhere. It really should stay with the married side of the family, do you not think?" My mother's ring, the one Dad put on her hand when they were 23. I said, That is Dad's to decide." Vanessa smiled the way frost smiles and said, "Of course, sweetie, for now." I went home and I did not tell Dad. I didn't have to. I told you, he noticed everything. Around that same time, Dad started doing quiet things. A man in a suit came to the house twice. Dad called him an old bowling buddy. Bowling buddies do not carry briefcases. Then, one morning, Dad asked me to drive him past the shop, Delaney Precision. We sat in the truck across the street, and he looked at those two bays for a long time. He said, "I sold it, Claire Bear, last month. Kessler machine out of Grand Rapids. Good people. They kept my guys on." I said, "Dad, why did you not tell anyone?" And he said something I did not understand for another year and a half. He said, "Because money is like a porch light, honey. Turn it on and you find out exactly what kind of moths you have got." Then he patted my hand and said, "Take the long way home. I want to see the lake." The last winter was the hardest. Hospital beds in living rooms, oxygen tubing coiled over the carpet like something growing. Some nights he was foggy, but most nights he was Frank Delaney, sharp as a lathe bit, beating me at cribbage with a blanket on his knees. One of those nights, near the end, he grabbed my wrist while I was fixing his pillow. He said, "Claire Bear, listen. When the time comes at Alderman's office, whatever you hear at first, you sit still and you stay for page 2. I said, "Dad, what does that mean?" He smiled, closed his eyes, and said, "It means your old man was a machinist. We measure twice." He passed on a Tuesday in March at 6:10 in the morning, with my hand in his. The funeral was lovely, and it was awful. Brandon gave a beautiful eulogy about a father he saw 4 times in 30 months. People cried. He is good at rooms, I told you. At the reception, over the ham sandwiches, Vanessa touched my arm. She said, "Such a hard day. By the way, did your dad ever say anything about your mom's ring?" At my father's funeral, over sandwiches. I looked at her and said, "I guess we'll all find out at the reading." I meant it as a way to walk away. I had no idea I was making a prophecy. The reading was set for a Thursday in April. Mr. Alderman's office, above the pharmacy on Main Street. Present, me, Brandon, Vanessa, dressed like a woman attending a coronation, and Aunt Karen, who was not in the will at all, but came, quote, "for support." Mr. Alderman is a small, gray man with a bow tie, about 100 years old, with the kindest, most unreadable face in the county. He opened a folder, squared the pages, and began. "The last will and testament of Franklin James Delaney." Page 1 was short. "To my son Brandon, I leave the family home on Birchwood Lane, my Ford pickup truck, and the balance of my personal checking account." There was a silence, about 1 second long. Then Aunt Karen actually clapped, twice, like a golf tournament. Vanessa squeezed Brandon's arm and whispered, "Told you." And Brandon, my brother, he exhaled, leaned back, and said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Well, that is that. Dad always knew who could handle responsibility." Then he looked at me, and I promise you there was a little sorry shrug in it, a little, "What did you expect, Claire?" Nobody asked what I got. Nobody wondered why my name had not come up. That is the thing about people like my family. Give them the headline they always wanted, and they stop reading. I sat still, because a machinist told me to. Mr. Alderman waited for the room to settle. He took a small sip of water. He turned the page with one finger, slow, like he had done this 1,000 times and still enjoyed it a little. And he said, "Now, if everyone is ready, page 2. Vanessa said, "There is more?" And Mr. Alderman looked at her over his glasses with that kind, unreadable face. He said, "Madam, with Frank Delaney there was always more. The man measured twice." I felt my heart start to pound. Brandon shifted in his chair, and somewhere, I swear, my father leaned back with a coffee and got comfortable.
Page 2 began with the house. Mr. Alderman read, "The beneficiary of the family home is advised that the property carries a home equity loan of $180,000, drawn over the final 3 years of my life to fund my medical care, which I chose never to request from my children." Brandon sat forward. He said, "Wait, the house has a what?" $180,000 against it, Mr. Alderman said pleasantly. "The bank will be in touch." My father had quietly paid for his own dying. He had asked his golden son for nothing, and he had let the house, the great prize, come wrapped in the bill. Mr. Alderman continued, "Further, the gift to my son is conditional upon repayment to the estate of the personal loan of $35,000 extended to him in good faith and unpaid at the time of my death. Should he decline, the home passes to St. Luke's Hospice." Vanessa's mouth opened and closed. She said, "He is counting the loan?" He wrote it down. Machinists keep tolerances. Then the old man's voice changed. Softer. "To my daughter, Claire." The whole room turned. "To my daughter, Claire, I leave the entire residue of my estate, including the proceeds of the sale of Delaney Precision, held in trust, in the amount of $940,000. Somebody made a sound. I think it was Karen. It was not a clap. "Including also the contents of my safe deposit box, namely her mother's engagement ring and one sealed letter." I did not hear the next few sentences, honestly. There was a ringing in my ears and my father's voice in it, saying, "Stay for page 2. Brandon was on his feet. He said, "This is insane. She lived off him for 3 years. She probably talked him into all of it. He was sick. He was confused." And Mr. Alderman, still pleasant, still 100 years old, slid one more document across the desk. He said, "Your father anticipated that remark. This is a letter of capacity from his physician, dated the same week the will was signed, 2 years ago. He also asked me to note the date of your last loan payment to him, which is a simpler document, as it does not exist." Vanessa went pale under her makeup. Aunt Karen suddenly remembered she was only here for support, and I sat still, in the quietest room in Michigan, while my brother inherited a mortgage, a truck, and an invoice.
Afterward, Mr. Alderman asked me to stay behind, alone. He took a small brass key from his drawer and an envelope with my name on it, in Dad's blocky machinist handwriting. Claire Bear. Not Claire, Claire Bear. He said, "Your father asked that you read it here. He said you would want a door between you and the parking lot. Smart man, my father." I opened it. I'm going to share some of it with you because I think he would allow it. Claire Bear. If Alderman is doing his job, everyone else has gone home to be angry, and you are sitting in the good chair. You are wondering why I let page 1 happen, why I let them clap. Here is why. I wrote page 1 for the family I was given. I wrote page 2 for the daughter who gave up everything and never once asked what was in it for her. I wanted them to show Aldermen exactly who they are, one last time, in a room with witnesses. Your brother has spent his whole life being handed things, so I handed him one more, the truth, with a lien on it. The money is not a reward, honey. You cannot pay somebody for 3 in the morning. The money is a door. Walk through it. Finish school. Buy a house nobody can ask you to leave. And the ring goes to you, because your mother would have chased Vanessa out of the yard with a garden hose, and we both know it. You were never the one who stayed because you had to. You were the one who noticed. Love, Dad. Measure twice. I sat in that office and cried for a long time. The good kind and the terrible kind, both at once. Mr. Alderman brought me a paper cup of water and stood at the window and let me be. Then, because the world does not pause for grief, my phone buzzed. Brandon. We are contesting this. Vanessa's cousin is a lawyer. You took advantage of a dying man. See you in court, Claire. I looked at the message for a while. Then I typed back one line, the truest thing I knew. He measured twice, Brandon, and I turned off my phone. The contest lasted 11 weeks, and it was over in one afternoon. Vanessa's cousin, the lawyer, met the capacity letter, the 2-year-old signing date, the physician's file, and Mr. Alderman's 40 years of standing in that county. The judge dismissed it before lunch and ordered them to cover a portion of the estate's legal costs. Brandon kept the house, technically. He repaid the $35,000 because losing the house to a hospice in front of the whole town was more shame than even Vanessa could style her way out of. Then the bank came for its $180,000. He sold the house on Birchwood Lane the following spring. After the loan, the repayment, and the fees, my brother's great inheritance came to almost exactly nothing, and a used pickup truck. Dad did not disinherit him, you see. Dad gave him precisely what Brandon had given back, a gesture that looked generous from a distance. Machinists keep tolerances. Vanessa lasted 8 more months. I hear the neighborhood she introduces herself by is different now. Aunt Karen called me last winter about a small loan. Just to get through the quarter, she said. Family helps family, sweetie. I said, I completely agree, Karen. That is why I am paying for Dad's headstone, and the hospice ward got a bench with his name on it. She has not called since. The quiet is lovely. And me? I finished my nursing degree, walked the stage in May with my mother's ring on my right hand. I bought a small house with a porch, and the first night I sat out there and turned the porch light on and laughed until I cried. Because he was right. The light came on and the moths had already shown themselves, every one of them, in a room with witnesses. People ask if I am angry that Dad tested them instead of just telling the truth while he was alive. I am not. He was not testing them. He knew the results before he wrote it down. He was protecting me so that no one could ever say I took anything. He made them hand me my future, in public, on the record, right after they clapped. So if your family has already decided what you are worth, do not argue with them. Just stay in your seat. Sometimes love writes 2 pages, and the quiet ones always read to the end. If this story held you until the end, subscribe to Vermilion Veil. There is a new story every single day, and behind every veil, the truth is waiting to burn.